A single letter, its ink trembling with secrets, arrives at Hercule Poirot's London flat, dragging him back to a case he thought buried a jewel theft from his youth in Liege. Masterminded by the elusive Lomba, who is this shadow that haunts his past? Why now, after decades of silence? As Poirot steps into a web of ciphers, spies, and betrayals stretching from Paris to Istanbul, each clue raises a chilling question. Is Lomba a ghost from his failures, or someone closer than he dares imagine? Unravel the mystery in Hercule Poirot's untold story, What Agatha Christie Hid. Chapter 1. The shadow of legacy. Rain fell in a steady drizzle over London, cloaking the city in a silver veil that softened the sharp edges of its bustling streets. In his immaculate flat at Whitehaven Mansions, Hercule Poirot sat by the window, a delicate porcelain cup of tisane balanced in his hands. His grey eyes, sharp as ever, traced the rivulets on the glass, but his mind was elsewhere. A letter, its edges worn and paper yellowed, lay open on the polished mahogany table beside him. The handwriting was elegant yet unsteady, as if penned by a hand trembling with urgency or age. It had arrived that morning, postmarked from Liege, Belgium, his homeland, a place he had not visited in decades. The letter was no ordinary correspondence. It spoke of a case from Poirot's youth, a jewel theft that had marked his early days as a policeman in Liege. The case was one he had thought resolved, buried in the archives of his past. Yet the letter hinted at secrets left uncovered, a figure known only as Lomba, the shadow who had eluded justice. The writer, anonymous but claiming intimate knowledge, urged Poirot to return to Belgium to confront this ghost from his past. The truth lies hidden, the letter concluded, and only your little grey cells can bring it to light. Poirot's moustache twitched as he set the cup down with a precise clink. The letter stirred something deep within him, a flicker of pride, perhaps, or the unease of unfinished business. He was no longer the young officer who had patrolled the cobblestone streets of Liege, his uniform crisp but his confidence untested. Now he was Hercule Poirot, the celebrated detective whose name was synonymous with brilliance. Yet this letter challenged that legacy, suggesting a failure he had not fully resolved. He rose, adjusting his perfectly tailored waistcoat, and crossed to the fireplace. The room was a study in order, books aligned with military precision, a single orchid blooming in a crystal vase, the air faintly scented with lavender polish. Poirot's mind, however, was a storm of questions. Who had written the letter? Why? Now, after so many years, and what was the true nature of Lomba's crime? The theft of the Vandermeer diamonds, as he recalled, had been audacious, a collection of flawless gems, stolen from a locked vault during a gala at the Palais des Princes Évêques. Poirot had arrested a minor accomplice, a nervous jeweller's apprentice, but the mastermind, Lomba, had vanished like mist. The decision was made before the clock struck noon. Poirot would return to Liege. Not out of sentimentality, mon Dieu. No, but because the puzzle demanded it. His little grey cells, as the letter so aptly noted, could not resist. The journey to Belgium was a study in contrasts. The sleek efficiency of the Dover-Calais ferry gave way to the rattling charm of a Belgian train, its compartments smelling of coal, dust, and old leather. Poirot, dressed in a charcoal overcoat and a Homburg hat tilted just so, sat alone, his gloved hands folded over a silver-topped cane. The countryside blurred past fields of green, church spires piercing the grey. Skyet, his thoughts remained fixed on the past. Liege, when he arrived, was both familiar and foreign. The city had grown, its medieval heart now threaded with tramlines and motorcars. The Meuse River glinted under a weak sun, and the air carried the faint tang of iron from nearby factories. Poirot checked into the Hôtel de la Couronne, a modest but elegant establishment near the Place Saint-Lambert. The concierge, a wiry man with a moustache rivaling Poirot's own, greeted him with a deferential nod. "Monsieur Poirot, it is an honor," the concierge said, his French tinged with a Walloon lilt. "Your reputation precedes you." Poirot inclined his head, a faint smile playing beneath his moustache. "Merci, monsieur. I require only a quiet room and, perhaps, your discretion." The concierge's eyes twinkled. "Discretion is my trade." "Monsieur." In his room, Poirot unpacked with meticulous care, arranging his toiletries in perfect alignment. The letter lay on the desk, its words memorized but no less enigmatic. The writer had mentioned a dossier hidden in the archives of the Liege police that held the key to Lombre's identity. Poirot's first task was to gain access to those archives a challenge, given that he was no longer a policeman and the case was decades old. The next morning, dressed in a suit of dove-grey serge, Poirot made his way to the Préfecture de Police, a stern building of red brick and limestone. The air inside was thick with the smell of ink and dust, and the clerk at the desk, a young woman with a severe bun, regarded him with suspicion. "I am Hercule Poirot," he announced, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man accustomed to being heard. "I wish to consult the archives regarding a case from 1898, the theft of the Vandermeer diamonds." The clerk's eyebrows rose. "Those records are restricted, monsieur. Only active officers may access them." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes glinting. "Mademoiselle, I was the officer who investigated that case. Surely an exception can be made for one who seeks only to correct an injustice." She hesitated, then relented under the weight of his charm. "I will speak to the archivist. Wait here." An hour later, Poirot sat in a dimly lit basement room, surrounded by shelves groaning with leather-bound ledgers. The archivist, a stooped man named Monsieur Dubois, had been persuaded partly by Poirot's reputation, partly by a discreetly offered banknote to retrieve the dossier. It was a slim file, its pages brittle and faded, but Poirot's heart quickened as he opened it. The dossier confirmed what he remembered. The theft had occurred during a gala attended by Liege-S elite. The Vandermeer diamonds, a gift from a Dutch merchant to his fiancée, were displayed in a glass case, guarded by 2 gendarmes. Yet, in a moment of distraction, the case was found empty, the gems gone. Poirot had traced the theft to a jeweller's apprentice, Claude Renard, who confessed to passing the diamonds to an unseen accomplice Lambert. Renard's testimony was vague, describing only a figure in a dark cloak, their face obscured. The trail had ended there, and Poirot, humiliated by his failure, had left Liege soon after. But the dossier held a surprise, a handwritten note, tucked between the pages, that had not been there during Poirot's time. It read, "Lambert is closer than you think. Look to the gala's guest list." The handwriting matched the anonymous letter. Poirot's fingers tapped the table, a rhythm of thought. The guest list. Why had he not examined it more closely all those years ago? He requested the list from Dubois, who grumbled but complied, returning with a yellowed sheet of names. Poirot scanned it, his eyes pausing on one entry, Émile Vasseur, a Parisian art dealer who had attended the gala as a guest of the Vandermeer family. Vasseur had left Liege the day after the theft, and no one had thought to question him. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. The art dealer, a man of culture, of opportunity. He thanked Dubois and left the prefecture, his mind alight. Versailles was a lead, but Paris was a city of shadows, and tracking a man from decades past would be no simple task. Still, Poirot felt the thrill of the chase, the satisfaction of a puzzle taking shape. He returned to the hotel where a telegram awaited him sent from Paris, signed only with the initial V. Monsieur Poirot, it read, "The trail of Lomba begins at the Café de la Lune, Montmartre. Come quickly, or the shadow moves on." Lips curved into a determined smile. The Café de la Lune was a bohemian haunt, a place where secrets were traded over absinthe and cigarette smoke. If Vasseur Lomba was there, Poirot would find him. He penned a reply to the hotel's concierge, requesting arrangements for the next train to Paris that evening. As he dined alone in the hotel's restaurant, Poirot overheard a conversation that sharpened his senses. Two men at a nearby table, their voices low, spoke of a recent theft in Brussels, a sapphire necklace, taken from a locked safe during a diplomatic reception. The method was eerily familiar, a distraction, a vanished gem, and whispers of a shadowy figure orchestrating it all. Poirot sipped his wine, his mind racing. Was Lomba still active, or was this a copycat? The coincidence was too striking to ignore. He resolved to visit the Brussels police before departing for Paris, to see if their files held any mention of the elusive mastermind. The next morning, Poirot took a short train ride to Brussels. The police station was a hive of activity, with officers bustling about and telephones ringing. A Herod inspector, one Capitaine Lefebvre, agreed to meet him, intrigued by the famous detective's interest in a local case, the sapphire theft. Monsieur Lefebvre said, spreading photographs across his desk. A clean job, no fingerprints, no witnesses, only a rumor, a name. Lomba Poirot's heart quickened, and the guest list for the reception. Lefebvre handed him a typed sheet. Poirot scanned it, his eyes narrowing. There, among the diplomats and dignitaries, was a name, Emile. Vasseur listed as a cultural attaché from Paris. Merci, Capitaine, Poirot said, rising. You have been most helpful. Back at the hotel, Poirot packed his valise with care, his movements precise, but his thoughts a whirl. The pieces were falling into place. Lomba, Vasseur, the gala, the sapphire theft. The letter had been no mere taunt, was a summons to a game of wits, one Poirot intended to win as he boarded the train to Paris. The rain had stopped, and a pale sun broke through the clouds. Poirot settled into his compartment, the letter and dossier tucked safely in his briefcase. The journey ahead promised danger, deception, and the chance to redeem a youthful failure. He adjusted his tie, smoothed his mustache, and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The shadow of Liege would not haunt him much longer. Chapter 2. The Parisian cipher. The train to Paris glided through the dusk, its rhythm a soothing counterpoint to the storm of thoughts in Hercule Poirot's mind. The Belgian countryside had given way to the sprawling outskirts of the French capital, where gaslights flickered like stars against the indigo sky. Poirot sat in his first-class compartment, his gloved hands resting on the dossier from Liege, its secrets now joined by the cryptic telegram from V. The Café de la Lune in Montmartre, Becanda, den of artists, poets, and, if the telegram was to be believed, conspirators. Lomba, the elusive shadow, was close, and Poirot's little grey cells hummed with anticipation. Paris greeted him with a cacophony of horns and the scent of roasted chestnuts. At the Gare du Nord, Poirot stepped onto the platform, his Homburg hat tilted at a precise angle, his overcoat impeccable despite the journey. A taxi whisked him to a discreet hotel near the Place Pigalle, where the pulse of Montmartre beat loudest. The Hotel Étoile d'Or was a faded gem, its Belle Epoque facade hiding rooms that smelled faintly of tobacco and old velvet. Poirot, ever particular, ensured his toiletries were arranged with geometric precision before turning his attention to the task at hand. The telegram had been specific: the Café de la Lune, 10 o'clock. Poirot dressed carefully, choosing a charcoal suit with a silk tie the color of claret. To blend into Montmartre's bohemian crowd, he adopted the guise of an art dealer, a role that suited his refined manners and sharp eye for detail. A forged business card, printed hastily but convincingly, identified him as Henry Duval, antiquaire. He tucked it into his pocket, along with a small notebook and a fountain pen, and set out into the night. Montmartre was alive with color and chaos. Street artists sketched under flickering lamps. Musicians strummed guitars in smoky doorways, and women in feathered hats laughed too loudly. The Café de la Lune stood at the end of a narrow street, its windows aglow with amber light. A sign above the door depicted a crescent moon cradling a glass of absinthe, promising both allure and danger. Poirot paused, his eyes scanning the crowd outside, poets arguing over vers libre, a painter bartering a canvas for wine, a woman in an emerald shawl watching him a moment too long. He noted her, his instincts prickling, but entered without hesitation. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke and the murmur of conversation. The café was a labyrinth of small tables, each a stage for whispered deals or impassioned debates. A pianist played a melancholic waltz, the notes weaving through the din. Poirot chose a table near the back, ordered a Pernod, and waited. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, took in every detail: the waiter's nervous glance toward a curtained alcove, the man in a velvet jacket scribbling furiously in a ledger, the woman from outside now seated alone, her shawl draped like a challenge. At precisely 10, a figure approached a man, slight and wiry, with a face like a fox and eyes that darted like minnows. He wore a threadbare suit, but his cufflinks gleamed with understated wealth. "Monsieur Duval?" he asked, his voice low, accented with the clipped tones of Brussels. Poirot nodded, gesturing to the chair opposite. "You are V, I presume?" The man sat, his movements quick and precise. "Victor," he said, offering no surname. "You seek lumber. I can help, but it comes at a price." Poirot's mustache twitched. "The price of truth is always negotiable." "Monsieur, what do you know?" Victor leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Lombard is no mere thief. He or she leads a society, a cabal of code-breakers who trade in secrets. They call themselves les chiffres. The Vandermeer diamonds were but a test, a distraction to fund their true work, destabilizing the great houses of Europe." Eyes narrowed. "And this society operates here, in Paris?" Victor nodded. "In Montmartre, hidden in plain sight. They use ciphers to communicate messages, hidden in paintings, poems, even menus. Lombard is their architect, but no one knows their face. I can get you closer, but you must prove yourself." Poirot sipped his Pernod, the anise sharp on his tongue. "And how does one prove oneself to such a society?" Victor slid a folded paper across the table. "Solve this. It's an invitation, of sorts. They meet tomorrow night at a studio in the Rue Norvins. Fail, and you'll never see Lombard." Poirot unfolded the paper, revealing a grid of numbers and letters, interspersed with cryptic symbols. It was a cipher, intricate and elegant, unlike any he had encountered. He tucked it into his pocket, his expression serene. "Mercy, monsieur. Victor, I shall consider your proposal." Victor rose, his fox-like eyes glinting. "Be quick, Duval. Lombard does not linger." As Victor vanished into the crowd, Poirot's gaze returned to the woman in the emerald shawl. She was watching him again, her lips curved in a knowing smile. He made a mental note she was no mere bystander. But the cipher demanded his attention now. He paid for his drink and left, the night air cool against his face. Back at the hotel, Poirot spread the cipher on his desk, the lamplight casting sharp shadows. The grid was a puzzle of substitution and transposition, layered with a Polybius, square and a hint of Vigenère. His little grey cells danced as he worked, his pen scratching across paper. Hours passed, the city outside falling silent. At last, the cipher yielded its secret. Atelier des Ombres, Rue Norvins, midnight. Speak of the crescent moon. Poirot leaned back, satisfied but wary. The Atelier des Ombres studio of shadows was a fitting name for a den of conspirators. But Victor's warning echoed, "Prove yourself." The cipher was only the first test. Les chauffeurs would not welcome an outsider lightly. The next evening, Poirot dressed as Henry Duval once more, adding a silk scarf for flourish. The Rue Norvins was a steep, winding street, its buildings leaning like conspirators. The Atelier was a narrow house, its windows dark save for a faint glow from an upper floor. Poirot knocked, murmuring the passphrase. "The crescent moon guides us." The door opened, revealing a woman, the same one from the café, her emerald shawl now, replaced by a black velvet gown. Her eyes, bright and assessing, met his. "Monsieur Duval," she said, her voice like velvet over steel, "you solved the cipher. I am Marianne, your guide." She led him up a creaking staircase to a room lit by candles. A dozen figures sat around a table, their faces half hidden by shadows. Paintings lined the walls, canvases of moons, labyrinths, and cryptic figures, each likely hiding a message. Marianne gestured to a seat. "Les chiffres welcome you, but trust is earned. We have a task." A man with a scarred cheek slid a book across the table. "And Anthology of French Poetry, page 47, he said. "Decode it now." Poirot opened the book, his fingers steady. The poem was Baudelaire, but the text was marked with faint pencil dots, a classic book cipher. He worked silently, his mind parsing patterns. The others watched, their silence heavy. At last he spoke. "The message warns of a traitor among you, planning to sell your secrets to a foreign agent tomorrow at the Pont Neuf." Murmurs rippled through the room. Marianne's eyes narrowed. "Accurate," she said. "But how do we know you are not the traitor?" Poirot smiled, his confidence unshaken. "Because, mademoiselle, I am Hercule Poirot, and my purpose is to unmask Lombard, not to betray you." Gasps filled the room. Marianne's expression softened, a flicker of respect in her gaze. "Then you have earned a chance," she said. "Lombard will be in Vienna next, at a masquerade ball. But beware, trust no one." The meeting dispersed, and Marianne slipped Poirot a folded map. "For Vienna," she whispered, "and a warning, Lombard knows you're coming." Poirot left the atelier, the map tucked safely away. The night was cold, but his heart burned with purpose. He had infiltrated Les Chauffeurs, gained an ally in Marianne, and secured a lead to Vienna. The chapter of his pursuit was closing, but the game was far from over. As he walked through Montmartre's labyrinthine streets, the shadow of Lombard loomed larger, yet Poirot felt the thrill of a puzzle half solved. Vienna awaited, and with it, the next move in this intricate dance. Chapter 3. The Viennese Masquerade, the train to Vienna carved through the Alps, its windows framing snow-dusted peaks and valleys cloaked in mist. Hercule Poirot sat in a plush compartment, his gloved hands folded over the map Marianne had given him in Paris. The folded parchment, worn at the edges, marked a single location: the Palais Liechtenstein, a Habsburg-era palace where a grand masquerade ball was to be held. According to Marianne, Lombard would be there, a shadow among the massed, orchestrating a trade of secrets that could shift the balance of European power. Poirot's grey eyes gleamed with resolve. The chase was growing sharper, the puzzle more intricate. Vienna greeted him with a crisp autumn chill and the scent of chestnuts roasting on street corners. The city was a tapestry of Baroque grandeur and modern bustle, its coffee houses alive with intellectuals and its streets echoing with the clatter of horse-drawn carriages. Poirot checked into the Hotel Sacre, a bastion of old-world elegance, where crystal chandeliers cast golden light over velvet drapes. His room was a haven of order, his toiletries aligned with precision, his suit pressed to perfection. Yet his mind churned, replaying Marianne's warning, "Lombard knows you're coming. To blend into the masquerade." Poirot adopted a new guise. A Venetian nobleman, complete with a black velvet mask adorned with gold filigree and a cloak embroidered with silver thread. His forged invitation, procured through Marianne's contacts, identified him as Conte Alessandro di Verona. The alias suited his flair for the dramatic, and the mask concealed his distinctive moustache, necessary sacrifice. The Palais Liechtenstein loomed like a fairy tale castle, its marble facade glowing under torchlight. Inside, the ballroom was a whirl of colour and sound, crystal goblets clinking, silks rustling, and a string quartet weaving Strauss waltzes through the air. Guests in elaborate masks, peacocks, jesters, and mythical beasts danced and whispered, their identities hidden, but their ambitions palpable. Poirot moved among them, his cane tapping lightly, his eyes scanning for clues. Marianne had hinted that Lombard's network trafficked in state, secrets disguised as rare manuscripts. Poirot's first task was to locate the exchange. He lingered near a marble staircase, overhearing snippets of conversation: a baroness discussing a lost Caravaggio, a diplomat muttering about a coded letter. Then a phrase caught his ear, spoken by a man in a harlequin mask. "The manuscript awaits in the Rose Salon." The voice was low, accented with a trace of French familiar, perhaps from the Liege dossier. Poirot followed the harlequin through the crowd, his movements graceful but deliberate. The Rose Salon was a smaller chamber, its walls adorned with frescoes of blooming gardens. A table held a display of manuscripts' illuminated pages, their margins crawling with cryptic symbols. A woman in a silver mask, her gown shimmering like moonlight, stood beside the table, her gloved hands turning pages with exaggerated care. Poirot approached, his voice smooth as velvet. "Signora," he said, bowing slightly, "these manuscripts are exquisite. Are they for sale?" Her eyes, visible through the mask, flickered with amusement. "Only to those who understand their value. Conte, do you read Latin?" "Enough to appreciate beauty," Poirot replied, his gaze locking on a manuscript titled Codex Lunaris. Its pages were marked with annotations in a cipher similar to the one he'd decoded in Paris. "This one intrigues me." "May I?" she nodded, stepping aside. Poirot examined the manuscript, his fingers tracing the inked symbols. The cipher was layered, combining Latin phrases with numerical sequences. His mind worked swiftly, decoding a fragment, treaty details. Berlin, midnight. This was no mere manuscript. It was a blueprint for espionage. Before he could read further, the Harlequin reappeared, his posture tense. "Conte, you linger too long," he said, his voice sharp. "The manuscripts are spoken for." Poirot turned, his mask concealing his smile. "Forgive me, Signor. I am merely an admirer of art. But tell me, who curates such treasures?" The Harlequin hesitated, then leaned closer. "A collector known as Lumber. But you'll not meet them. They prefer shadows." The words confirmed Poirot's suspicions. But the Harlequin's gait a slight limp, favoring the left leg, struck a deeper chord. It matched a description from the Liege dossier. Émile Vasseur, the Parisian art dealer, had walked with a limp after a childhood injury. Could this be Vasseur, or merely a lieutenant of Lumber? The waltz swelled, drawing the Harlequin back. To the ballroom, Poirot seized the moment, slipping a tiny photograph of the manuscript's key page into his pocket trick, learned from a Scotland Yard colleague. He needed time to decode the rest, but the salon was no longer safe. The woman in the silver mask was watching him, her gaze too keen. As midnight approached, the ball reached its crescendo. Masks were to be removed, a tradition Poirot knew would force Lombar's hand. He positioned himself near the grand chandelier, where the hoster, portly Austrian duke, prepared to signal the unmasking. The crowd gathered, anticipation electric. Poirot's eyes locked on the Harlequin, who stood near a side door, his hand twitching as if ready to flee. The Duke raised his glass. "Ladies and gentlemen, reveal yourselves." Masks fell, revealing flushed faces and nervous smiles. The Harlequin hesitated, then tore off his mask, exposing a lined face with sharp cheekbones. Émile Vasseur, unmistakable from an old photograph in the dossier. Poirot moved swiftly, intercepting him before he could slip through the door. "Monsieur Vasseur," Poirot said, his voice low but commanding. "Or should I say, confidant of Lombard?" Hercule Poirot requests a moment. Vasseur's eyes widened, but he recovered quickly, his smile thin. "You mistake me, Conte. I am merely a guest." "Then you will not mind a conversation with the Viennese police?" Poirot replied, gesturing to a uniformed officer nearby. He had alerted the authorities earlier, a precaution born of experience. Vasseur paled, his limp more pronounced as he tried to back away. But the officer was swift, detaining him with a firm hand. "We have questions about stolen manuscripts," the officer said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Poirot stepped back, his work here done. Vasseur's arrest was a victory, but Lombard remained at large. As the ball resumed, Poirot slipped into the rose salon, where the woman in the silver mask was gone, the Codex Lunares replaced with a blank volume. A note lay tucked inside, written in elegant script. "Well played, Poirot. Istanbul awaits." He pocketed the note, his mind already turning to the next move. The manuscript's photograph, safely hidden, would yield its secrets later. For now, Vasseur's arrest had disrupted Lombard's network, a satisfying end to this Viennese gambit. Poirot left the palace, the night air sharp with promise. Istanbul, with its labyrinthine bazaars and hidden truths, was the next stage. Lombard was a step closer, and Poirot's resolve burned brighter than ever. Chapter 4. The Orient Express. Gambit the Simplon, Orient Express, gleamed under the Istanbul-bound sun. Its polished carriages a testament to luxury and intrigue. Hercule Poirot stood on the platform at Vienna's Westbahnhof, his black silk hat tilted against the morning glare, his gloved hands gripping a leather valise. Inside, nestled among his meticulously packed essentials, was the photograph of the Codex Lunaris manuscript, its cipher partially decoded, but still guarding secrets. The note from the Viennese masquerade, Istanbul awaits, burned in his memory, a taunt from Lomba that fueled his determination. With Marianne, his sharp-witted cryptographer ally from Paris, at his side, Poirot boarded the train, ready for the next move in this intricate chess game. The compartment was a cocoon of mahogany and velvet, its windows framing the rolling Danube valley. Marianne, dressed in a tailored navy suit, her auburn hair pinned elegantly, sat opposite Poirot, studying the Codex photograph with a furrowed brow. "This cipher is devilish," she murmured, her French accent crisp. "It's layered Vigenère over a Polybius square, with a keyword buried in the Latin. I've cracked half of it, treaty, Berlin, envoy, but the rest resists me." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of approval. "Patience, mademoiselle. The little grey cells, they work in concert with time. The key word, perhaps, is hidden in the context of the treaty itself." Marianne nodded, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the puzzle. "A diplomatic treaty, then. But why Istanbul? What does Lomba want there?" "That," Poirot said, tapping his cane lightly, "is what we shall discover. Lomba plays a game of shadows, but shadows cannot exist without light." The train's whistle pierced the air, and the journey began. The Orient Express was a microcosm of Europe's elite. Diplomats in starched collars, heiresses dripping with pearls, and merchants with calculating eyes. Poirot, still posing as Conte Alessandro di Verona, moved among them with practiced ease, his Venetian nobleman's charm disarming even the most guarded. Marianne played the role of his assistant, her quick wit and subtle glances catching details Poirot might miss. Dinner in the dining car was a spectacle of crystal and silver, the air scented with roasted pheasant and Burgundy wine. Poirot and Marianne sat at a table near the centre, their conversation light but their senses alert. The cipher's mention of a treaty suggested a diplomatic target, and Poirot's eyes scanned the passengers. A Prussian envoy, Herr Klaus Vogel, caught his attention, a stout man with a monocle, his briefcase chained to his wrist. Vogel's nervous glances and guarded posture screamed importance as the waiter served creme brulee. Poirot noticed something peculiar. The menu, embossed with the Orient Express crest, had faint pencil marks beneath certain dishes. He leaned closer, his fingers brushing the paper. The marks formed of pattern letters and numbers, a cipher hidden in plain sight. He slipped the menu into his pocket, exchanging a look with Marianne, who nodded imperceptibly. Back in their compartment, they examined the menu under lamplight. Marianne's pencil flew across her notebook, decoding the marks. "It's a substitution cipher," she said, her voice low. "It reads, Vogel, Treaty, Midnight, Compartment 12. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Lomba strikes tonight. We must act, mademoiselle." They devised a plan. Marianne would keep watch on the corridor, posing as a sleepless passenger, while Poirot investigated Compartment 12. At 11:30, the train swayed through the Serbian hills, its rhythm a lullaby to the unwary. Poirot, dressed in a dark dressing gown to blend with the shadows, slipped into the corridor. Marianne, a shawl draped over her shoulders, lingered near the dining car. Her eyes, sharp. Compartment 12 belonged to a Hungarian merchant, LSCL Kovacs, whose jovial demeanor at dinner had seemed forced. Poirot knocked softly, using a skeleton gear, discreet acquisition from a Parisian locksmith, to enter when no answer came. The compartment was empty, but a hidden panel in the wall revealed a locked box. Poirot's nimble fingers worked a hairpin, and the box opened, revealing a typed document, a draft treaty between Prussia and Austria, detailing military concessions. This was no mere theft lumber aimed to disrupt nations. A faint creak in the corridor snapped Poirot's attention. He replaced the document and slipped behind the curtain just as the door opened. A figure entered, cloaked in black, their face obscured by a scarf. They moved to the panel, retrieving the box with practiced ease. Poirot's heart raced. This was no ordinary thief. The figure's movements were precise, their build slight but athletic, lumber or another pawn. Before Poirot could act, a shadow moved outside Marianne's signal. The figure froze, then bolted, clutching the box. Poirot gave chase, his cane discarded for speed. The corridor was a maze of swaying shadows, the train's motion adding urgency. The figure reached the dining car, where Marianne stood, feigning surprise. "Stop," she cried, blocking the path. The figure shoved past, but Marianne's quick hands grabbed the scarf, revealing a glimpse of a sharp jawline and dark eyes before the figure vanished into the next carriage. Poirot caught up, breathless but undeterred. "Bravo, mademoiselle. You have unmasked our thief, if not their identity." The pursuit ended at the baggage car, where the figure had vanished, but the box lay discarded, the treaty still inside. Poirot's lips curved in satisfaction. Lombar's plan had been thwarted, at least for now. He and Marianne returned the treaty to Vogel's compartment, ensuring it was secure. The envoy, roused from sleep, was none the wiser. His gratitude effusive when Poirot, as the Comte, hinted at a security concern resolved. Dawn broke as the train neared Istanbul, the Bosphorus glinting like molten gold. Poirot and Marianne sat in their compartment, the menu's cipher and the treaty's recovery a small victory. But Lombar's escape gnawed at Poirot. The figure's agility, their knowledge of the train's layout, it suggested a mastermind who anticipated his moves. Marianne, studying the codex photograph again, broke the silence. The cipher's second half fit mentions a bazaar in Istanbul. The Grand Bazaar, I'd wager. Lombar's next move is there. Poirot nodded, his eyes distant. "Oui, mademoiselle. The game continues. But we have shown Lombard that Poirot is no mere shadow." As the train pulled into Sakechi station, Poirot felt the weight of the chase. Istanbul's minarets rose against the sky, promising a labyrinth of secrets. Lombard had slipped through his fingers, but the treaty was safe, and the trail was warm. The Orient Express had been a battleground, and Poirot had won this round. He stepped onto the platform, Marianne at his side, ready to face the bazaar's shadows with renewed resolve. Chapter 5. The Bazaar of Secrets. The Grand Bazaar of Istanbul sprawled like a living maze, its vaulted ceilings echoing with the clamour of merchants hawking spices, silks, and silver. The air was thick with the scents of saffron, leather, and rosewater, a sensory assault that Hercule Poirot navigated with his usual fastidious grace. Dressed as a Belgian antiquarian, Monsieur Adrien Lambert, He wore a cream linen suit and a wide-brimmed hat to shield his face from the midday sun filtering through the bazaar's skylights. At his side, Marianne, now posing as his assistant, carried a leather satchel containing the Codex Lunaris photograph and her cipher-breaking notes. The decoded fragment, pointing to a secret auction in the bazaar, had led them here, where Lombard planned to sell a ledger of compromising secrets. Poirot's grey eyes darted across the labyrinthine alleys, noting the rhythm of the crowd. A carpet seller's rhythmic chant, a boy weaving through with a tray of tea, a veiled woman whose glance lingered too long. The bazaar was a perfect stage for Lombard's schemes, its chaos a cloak for deception. Marianne, her auburn hair tucked beneath a silk scarf, leaned close. "The Codex mentions a stall near the Neuro-Osmany gate," she whispered. "Something about the lamp of truth." Poirot nodded, his moustache twitching. "A poetic name, mademoiselle, but we shall find it. Lombard hides in plain sight, and we must be the light." They moved through the bazaar, Poirot's cane tapping a steady rhythm. The Neuro-Osmany gate loomed ahead, its arched entrance framed by intricate tiles. Nearby, a stall glowed with brass lanterns, their filigree casting star-like patterns on the stone floor. A sign above read, "Hockeycott Lambassade, the lamp of truth." The merchant, a wiry man with a silver beard, polished a lantern with deliberate care, his eyes sharp beneath bushy brows. "Monsieur Poirot," said, his French accent softened to match his antiquarian guise, "your lanterns are magnificent. Do you have something special for a discerning collector?" The merchant, whose nameplate read Osman, studied Poirot, then Marianne. "Special items are for those who know the right questions," he replied, his Turkish accented with a hint. "Of the Levant, what do you seek?" Poirot leaned closer, his voice low. "A ledger, perhaps, bound in secrets, offered under the light of truth." Osman's eyes flickered, but he gestured to a curtained alcove behind the stall. "Step inside, Effendi. We speak privately." The alcove was cramped, its walls lined with rugs that muffled sound. Osman produced a locked box, its surface inlaid with mother of pearl. "The auction is tonight," he said, "for those who can pay in gold or information. The ledger you seek it holds names, dates, scandals. Very dangerous." Poirot's heart quickened. This was Lombard's prize, the culmination of their schemes. "And the seller?" he asked, his tone casual but probing. Osman's smile was thin. "They do not show their face. A representative comes, cloaked, at midnight. The password is Eclipse." Marianne's hand brushed Poirot's, a signal of her readiness. They thanked Osman and left, blending into the crowd. "A midnight auction," Marianne murmured. "We need a plan to outbid or outwit them." Mind was already spinning. "We shall do both, mademoiselle. But first, we must ensure the ledger does not leave this bazaar." They spent the day preparing, Poirot's meticulous nature guiding their strategy. Marianne, using her cryptographer's skills, forged a bidding card, claiming they represented a wealthy Swiss collector. Poirot, meanwhile, visited a local contact, a retired Ottoman diplomat who owed him a favor from a case years prior. The diplomat provided a map of the bazaar's hidden passages, used by smugglers to move goods unseen. "Be careful, Poirot," the diplomat warned. "The bazaar has eyes." As night fell, the bazaar transformed. Lanterns cast a golden glow, and the crowds thinned, leaving only those with secrets to trade. Poirot and Marianne returned to Osman's stall, their bidding card in hand. The alcove was now a hub of hushed activity, with a dozen figures, merchants, spies, and shadowed. Elites gathered around a table. A cloaked figure stood at the center, the ledger bound in black leather before them. Their face was hidden, but their posture was confident, almost mocking. "Gentlemen, ladies," the cloaked figure said, their voice distorted by a silk mask, "the ledger contains truths that could topple ministries. Bidding begins at £10,000. Poirot, as Monsieur Lambert, raised his card. 11,000, he said, his tone steady. Marianne, at his side, feigned note-taking, her eyes scanning the crowd for threats. The bidding escalated. Driven by a Russian diplomat and a Turkish banker, their greed palpable. Poirot matched each bid, his calm demeanor belying his racing pulse. At 15,000, the cloaked figure paused, their gaze settling on him. "You are bold, monsieur," they said, "but do you know the cost of truth?" "Truth is my currency," Poirot replied, his eyes locking with the unseen face. The auction ended at 20,000, Poirot's bid unchallenged. The cloaked figure handed him the ledger, but as he reached for it, a shout rang out, a distraction. Orchestrated by Marianne, who had slipped a forged note to a nearby merchant, claiming a police raid. The crowd scattered, and the cloaked figure bolted, vanishing into a side alley. Poirot clutched the ledger, but Marianne grabbed his arm. "The passages," she hissed, pulling him toward a hidden door marked on their map. The chase was on. The bazaar's tunnels, a claustrophobic warren of stone and shadow. Poirot's cane was useless here, but his senses were sharp, tracking the cloaked figure's faint footsteps. Marianne, agile and fearless, kept pace, her satchel swinging. The tunnel opened into a courtyard, where the figure stood, trapped by a locked gate. Poirot advanced, his voice cutting through the night. "Lombard, your game ends here. Show yourself." The figure turned, their mask slipping to reveal a woman's face, sharp cheekbones, dark eyes, but not the mastermind Poirot expected. "I am not Lombard," she spat, her French accent laced with defiance. "Merely their courier. You'll never catch them." Marianne searched her, finding a note. "London, the final reckoning." The woman struggled, but Poirot's calm authority held her. "You will tell the police what you know," he said, signaling to officers summoned earlier via his diplomat. "Contact." The woman was led away, the ledger secure in Poirot's hands. Back at their hotel, Poirot and Marianne examined the ledger. Its pages detailed bribes, betrayals, and diplomatic secrets enough to shake Europe's foundations. "Lombard's work," Marianne said, her voice awed. "But they're still out there." Poirot nodded, the note burning in his pocket. "Oui, mademoiselle, London awaits, and with it, the end game. We have the ledger, a blow to Lombard's plans." This chapter closes, but the story is not yet finished. As they prepared to leave Istanbul, the city's minarets glowed under a crescent moon. Poirot felt a surge of triumph. The ledger was a prize, the courier's capture a victory. Yet Lombard's taunt echoed, promising a final confrontation. Poirot adjusted his hat, his resolve unbreakable. The bazaar had yielded its secrets, but London would be the true test. Chapter 6. The London Reckoning. The fog draped London like a shroud, curling around the gaslit streets and muffling the clop of horses' hooves. Hercule Poirot stood at the window of his Whitehaven mansion's flat, his silhouette sharp against the soft glow of a single lamp. The ledger from Istanbul lay on his desk, its pages a litany of secrets that could unravel alliances, secrets Lombard had orchestrated with chilling precision. The note from the bazaar, "London, the final reckoning was a gauntlet thrown, and Poirot's little grey cells thrummed with the challenge. Marianne, his cryptographer ally, sat nearby, her fingers tracing the ledger's final cipher, which hinted at a meeting in a fog-shrouded manor on the city's outskirts. Tonight, Poirot would face Lombard and end the chase that had begun. In Liege, the journey to Hampstead Heath was a study in contrasts. The city's clamour faded into the eerie quiet of the countryside, where mist clung to gnarled trees. Poirot, dressed in a black overcoat and scarf to blend with the night, rode in a hired car with Marianne, who had traded her usual elegance for a practical wool dress. The manor, Blackthorn Hall, loomed ahead, a Gothic pile of ivy-clad stone, its windows dark save for a flicker in an upper room. The invitation, slipped under Poirot's door that morning, had been explicit: "Come alone," but Marianne's insistence and her skill with ciphers made her indispensable. They approached on foot, the gravel drive crunching under their steps. The air was heavy with damp earth and the faint scent of woods. Poirot's cane, now a tool of stealth rather than style, probed the ground for hidden traps. "Lombard expects us," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "This is their stage, but we shall rewrite the script." Marianne nodded, her eyes scanning the shadows. The cipher mentioned a library. "That's where they'll be." The manor's door was unlocked, a deliberate law. Inside, the air was cold, the hall echoing with the drip of a distant leak. Portraits of stern-faced aristocrats lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow Poirot as he moved. A grand staircase led to the library, its double doors carved with ravens, a fitting emblem for Lombard's dark machinations. Poirot pushed them open, revealing a room of towering bookshelves and a roaring fire that cast dancing shadows. At the centre stood a figure, cloaked in black, their face hidden by a porcelain mask painted with a crescent moon. A table before them held a single item, a leather folder, its contents obscured. "Monsieur Poirot," the figure said, their voice low and melodic, with a Belgian lilt that stopped Poirot cold. "You've chased me across Europe. Bravo." Poirot stepped forward, his posture erect, his eyes unyielding. "Lombard, your game ends here. Remove the mask and face Hercule Poirot." The figure laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You think you've won. The ledger was but a piece of the puzzle. This folder holds the true prize secrets that could ignite war." Marianne, standing by the door, clutched her satchel, ready to act. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together fragments: the Liege theft, the Parisian ciphers, the Viennese manuscripts, the Istanbul ledger. The voice that accented stirred a memory from his youth, a colleague from the Liege police, Julien Moreau, whose ambition had bordered on obsession. Could it be? "You are Julien Moreau," Poirot said, his tone steady. "Once my comrade, now my adversary. Your jealousy drove you to this, Nan. The Vandermeer diamonds were your first strike, to disgrace me." The figure froze, then slowly removed the mask, revealing a face lined with years but sharp with defiance. Julien Moreau, his hair now silver, his eyes burning with old grudges. "You were always the golden boy, Poirot," he spat. "The prodigy. I orchestrated the theft to ruin you, but you rose higher. Lombard was my creation, my revenger network to outshine your little grey cells." Poirot's heart sank, not with fear but with sorrow for a friendship lost. "And now you trade in chaos, Julien. For what power?" Moreau gestured to the folder. "Control. These secret skins, ministers, spies, they bow to me. But you, Poirot, You've met too long. He lunged for the folder, but Poirot was faster, his cane striking Moreau's wrist with precision. The folder fell, papers scattering. Marianne darted forward, gathering them as Moreau recovered, drawing a slender blade from his cloak. "You'll not leave this room," he hissed. The library became a battlefield of wits and motion. Poirot, despite his age, moved with agility, using the bookshelves for cover. Marianne, her courage fierce, hurled a brass bookend, catching Moreau's shoulder. The distraction was enough. Poirot tackled him, pinning him against the table, his strength fueled by resolve. "It is over, Julian," he said, his voice firm, but tinged with regret. "The police are coming." As if summoned, the sound of boots echoed in the hall. Poirot had alerted Scotland Yard before leaving, a precaution born of experience. Inspectors burst in, restraining Moreau, who glared at Poirot with unyielding hatred. "You've won nothing," he snarled. "The shadows remain." But Poirot knew better. The folder, now in Marianne's hands, contained letters implicating Moreau's, network names, dates, and deals that would dismantle Lombarès empire. The police took Moreau away, his curses fading into the fog, back at Whitehaven Mansions. Poirot sat by the fire, a glass of tisane in hand. Marianne had returned to Paris, her role in the saga complete, her promise to visit a bright note in Poirot's future. The ledger and folder were with Scotland Yard, their secrets no longer a threat. Poirot opened the Liege dossier, its pages a reminder of his youthful failure. With a steady hand, he fed it to the flames, watching the paper curl and vanish. The firelight danced, casting no shadows. Poirot's heart was light, his conscience clear. Lombard was unmasked, Julian's betrayal laid bare, and the ghosts of Liege silenced. The case was closed, the puzzle solved. Hercule Poirot, the little Belgian detective, had triumphed, and in the quiet of his flat, he found peace a fitting end to a story that needed no sequel.